All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a discussion. Spoiler free, we think, for the most part. It'll be mostly spoiler free. If we decide to talk spoilers at all, we will warn you. But let's just call it for now a spoiler free discussion assessment. Why you should read, discussion about Vagabond, the manga that Merphy and I just finished. And wow, what a journey. And obviously here's Merphy to talk with me. Hello, Merphy. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you, Philip?
Doing wonderful. Doing wonderful. I'm very excited to talk about this series because I found this to be a really beautiful experience. I am so
Hmm.
glad that we read this and that we read it together because our discussions, by the way, everybody, we've had a full series discussion. The videos appear on Merphy's second channel, Merphy Napier Reviews, and on my channel. And we both have playlists of the whole thing. There are, I think, 13 videos in all, right? So
Yes.
pretty sure it's 13. so so yeah, it was just a wonderful journey, and I'm really excited to give our sort of general wrap up and assessment of the entire thing.
Yeah, me too. Me too. We have dug into this series in that playlist that you mentioned. So, taking a step back and reflecting on what the series did as a whole, should be a lot of fun. So, I'm excited.
Yeah, and I hope that we can do a little bit of a sales job for people who might be thinking about reading the series. The people who have read the series seem to be incredibly devoted to it, and for good reason, I would say. So, just to briefly talk about what it is based on the novel Musashi, which is about a historical figure, Musashi, who around 1600 or so, uh, there was a um, there was a big battle, actually. Sekigahara is a sort of a pivotal moment here, and it's a transitional moment for Japanese society in many ways, going from the older way of the sword kind of ideal to a slightly more modernizing period. So it's a period of transition. That's the kind of the setting for the whole thing. But it is an unfinished series. And so, Merphy, one of the first things I wanted to ask you was, well, should people read this? Why should they be concerned about it being unfinished? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as you know, it has an unofficial ending when Inoue realized that he probably wasn't going to be finishing it anytime soon. He went ahead and wrote an unofficial ending, which makes it not conclude in the way a series you would expect. All the loose ends are not tied up, all the characters didn't get their full arcs. So there is some unsatisfaction there, but the ending I think couldn't be more perfect.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
really feels like it doesn't feel, I mean, sure, I want Inoue to come back to it someday if he feels right to come back to it. Because there are things that I'd like to see, but it feels finished. So I don't even think of it so much as an unfinished series, more as the author may come back and add some stuff, or it may be done.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree. I'm okay if Inoue never comes back to it. I don't have a problem with that. I hope he does, like all the other people who ever read this series. But if he doesn't, I'm okay. I'm actually very satisfied with what we got. And that ending, without any spoilers, was just one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. It was just so beautiful and melancholy and just so it captures so much of life, really,
Yeah.
in such a beautiful way. So
Yeah,
excellent.
it really exceeded expectations. It leaned into the feelings, which I think was a good end for such a philosophical kind of story.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So now I am definitely the manga newbie here.
Me too.
Well, Murphy, you're the expert in comparison to me,
Maybe in the room.
the expert in the room. So I have read two manga series, thanks to you, actually. This is really kind of cool. Part of all this is that like a year ago, you and I started to talk when you came as a guest on my channel, and we talked manga because I thought, well, Murphy's reading manga, maybe she could tell me. And you suggested Vinland Saga as a starting point, and that's where we started doing all of this. And then we started Vagabond, and I feel like, wow, look what I've been missing. This is an incredible medium. This is a really beautiful way of storytelling.
Yeah.
And so you have read something more like 8 or 9 manga,
Yeah, something like that.
something like that. So I wouldn't call you a newbie anymore. Maybe intermediate. I don't know.
No, I think I'm still a newbie. Like
Okay.
I said this to you before we started recording, but that's like reading 8 or 9 books and saying I've read them all. Like I still have so much that I have not experienced yet,
Yeah.
but I have read some.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for my sake, because in comparison to you, I'm definitely the newbie. Uh, Perhaps you could just give me some idea. How would you characterize this in relation to manga as a whole? What is its place? You don't have to rank it. You can if you want. I mean, it would be easy for me to do a ranking because I have 1 and 2.
What? How do you rank 1 and 2?
Oh my goodness. Now you
You
put me
said
on.
easy.
Yeah.
No, I'm making you do it.
Why did I say that?
Do
Can I just
it.
insert my foot in my mouth right now?
Right. Make all the fans mad at you. Pick your
Yeah,
favorite.
I've actually been asked a couple times already, and so I do have an answer, although it's a reluctant answer in a way.
Yeah.
I love both. I love Vinland
Mhm.
Saga. I love Vagabond. They are very similar, and we're going to talk about that probably when we talk about themes. They're very similar in some respects, but they're also very different in
Mhm.
some respects. And I
Mhm.
think overall, I will talk about why in a bit, but I think if I have to pick, the scale is like almost even, but just, I'm gonna go with Vagabond
I knew you would.
as my favorite manga of all time that I've read so far.
I knew you would because you are such a philosophizer and a thoughtful person, and you really connect with a lot of the things explored here.
Yeah,
And I know that there's a lot in Vinland Saga that we wanted to dig into and we wanted to explore together as well. But this really aligns a lot with the themes that you've put in your own book and
yeah,
with the stuff that you and I have talked about outside of the mangas. And I know that this kind of resonates with you on a different sort of level. So it's not even about quality. It's not even about what's better. It's about what connected to you, your inner man, more.
yeah. You said it better than I could have. So yeah, that's very true. This is a series that in some ways is just perfect for me because of the things that fascinate me about life and the things that I'm interested in as a writer as well. There's the Buddhist elements in Vagabond, and there, by the way, there's some in Vinland Saga too,
Mhm.
because the writer, or what's the word for a manga writer person? There's a word for it.
Mangaka,
Mangaka.
or you
That's
could
I
say
almost said that.
artist.
Yeah, artist. Yeah. Um. What was it? Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name now. It's.
Um, oh shucks, I don't know either.
Oh no. We'll think of it probably after we're done chatting. But anyway, he obviously inserted some Buddhist themes into that as well. But the setting is Viking. It's Norse. It's
Mhm.
yeah. So it's very which is definitely up my alley too, is because I'm a medievalist and I love Old
Yukimura.
Norse. That's it. Yeah, Yukimura. Yeah. So he did a wonderful job. But I think the overall tone of Vagabond, it reaches certain heights. I think
Mhm.
that yes, Vinland Saga reaches great heights too, but Vagabond is just wow, and
Mhm.
also the art. I think I have just a slight preference for the experimentation that Inoue was doing. I kind of like how he seems to be pushing the edges, and doing some interesting things. And they're both thinking about similar things, though. So it's a really
Mhm.
tough one. But Vagabond, I think overall is going to be where I have to go. But you have more manga to compare it to. So how would you place it among you in your experience?
Right. So it's tough to say because we've talked about this before, but there are 4 main categories
Yeah.
that manga fall into. So this is um I've forgotten the name for it.
Wait, you're the expert,
I'm
Merphy.
such a pro. I know all the things. Anyway, seinen. This is seinen.
Seinen, yes.
So
Yes.
I've only read two seinen stories so far, and it's the same two seinen stories that you've read.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, right. So I can't even compare it among its brothers, because I've read two. So I don't know, but I
Do
can
you have
tell
a
you that
preference? Vagabond, Vinland Saga?
it's hard. I think for me, Vinland Saga has higher highs and lower lows, whereas Vagabond feels like just a steady, smooth movement.
Uh-huh.
So my gut reaction is to lean towards Vinland Saga because there are moments within Vinland Saga that just impacted me.
Sure.
But I think that overall, with Vagabond being so steady of a journey, it just barely wins out a little bit for me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's
um,
interesting because Vinland Saga did make me cry. Vagabond,
yeah,
I don't think it did, but Vinland Saga did.
I'm sure they both did for me. I'm a crier. But yes, Vagabond made me, I mean, Vinland Saga made me weep at
Yeah.
the end of the first arc.
Yeah.
And there were certain panels, certain page turns that when I turned the page, it was like, oh, it was like being hit with a force. But there are also parts of Vinland Saga that I was, not really all that into. Um, and Vagabond, I don't really have a lot of moments like that. It's mostly just, as I said, just like that steady, smooth, very slow journey. So
Yeah.
more impact here in moments, more steady impact here. I don't know. It's harder.
Yeah, for me, I would say the one thing that didn't work so much for me with Vinland Saga was the humor. The
Mm,
humor in Vinland Saga, I never actually laughed. I was like, okay, he's having a light moment, which is good, to have in a series with so much violence and loss and etc. But it never really connected with me. The humor, it was a little goofy, and I'm always up for goofy, but it just didn't work so much. But there is some humor in Vagabond as well, and when it was there, it had more of an impact for me. I think
mhm,
the Vagabond humor. There's less of it, but when it's there, it was like, oh, okay, haha, So
mhm.
anyway, that was
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
small.
that's true. I remember you really got a huge chuckle out of a certain moment where a haircut was being given.
Yes, that was great.
Yeah, I liked the humor in Vinland Saga, but I also, am reading One Piece, so
Yes, yes, okay.
but yeah, it's definitely of the series that I've read, it's in the upper half of them.
Yeah.
So, but beyond that, how I would rank it, shoot, I would have to have some thought to really compare it to others. But it was an incredible journey. I think that it had kind of a start that was like, okay, what are we doing? It took me a while to really feel like I kind of had my footing within the series. But once I felt like I got my footing and I was like, okay, this is what we're doing, then it really wasn't a bumpy ride. It's a very slow story. It's a very introspective story. It really felt less like we were reading a plotted out tale, which I'm sure anyway did plot it out and knew what he wanted to do, but it felt far less like that, and it felt more like we were really just going on a life journey with someone,
Mhm.
and how where life takes you, where the other people that come into your life take you, where your changing worldviews take you, is just where the story went. So it really felt like we were journeying alongside Musashi, more than most stories I think feel.
Yeah, beautifully said. It does feel like that, and at the end, you do feel like you've been on that journey, and
Yeah.
it's transformative. It's beautiful stuff. Very
Hmm.
cathartic. Excellent. So we started to talk a little bit about themes, and we mentioned the Buddhist elements and that sort of thing. So, what are your thoughts, Murphy, on some of the more important themes? What can readers expect theme-wise? What does anyway engage in? Feel free to roam wherever you wish. What were the themes that you felt most impactful?
Yeah. As an explorer, as someone who loves to be out in nature, I really, really loved the importance, and as someone who really values, people, and I believe that connection is the only way to survive in life. And that is a big part of this story, is connection with people, connection with the earth, connection with your surroundings, kind of a shedding of a inward facing look at life. I don't know a ton about Buddhism. As I understand it, it's a lot of shedding of self. And I don't think that some level of selfishness is bad. I don't think that trying to care for yourself and your family is a negative thing. I think that that's a positive thing. But living a life that's so inward facing that, looking out for number one is your highest priority, I think is a very unfulfilling way to live life. That's the way I feel about life. And this story really tackles that. It tackles that isolation. It tackles that trying to raise yourself up and fulfill yourself in life and gain what you want out of life, and how lonely that is and how unfulfilling that can be, and how you might get to the end of that life, at the end of the rope, and find yourself still isolated and still alone and still unfulfilled. And then the fulfillment that comes from connection, from community, from serving one another and working together at life. And, other people may feel different ways, but for me, that very much aligns with the way I see life. And I don't agree with all the philosophies that are brought up in this story, but that's one that really I resonated with strongly, as well as kind of drawing in on a lifestyle, the life of a samurai, of a fighter, of a warrior, really bringing that in close, seeing the appeal of it, seeing the fulfillment that comes from that, seeing what would draw people to it, and then kind of deconstructing it layer by layer and looking at it anew. I really loved that as well. Those are two. I don't want to talk too long. Philip, you
Oh,
hit me with
I'm just soaking it all in.
you hit me with some that you loved.
You expressed it so well. So transcendence of the ego through connecting with others, through community, through a sense of one's place in the world. And that's just gorgeous. That is something that I think is so, so important, not just as a theme to read about, but honestly, I feel like as a species, our survival may depend on that.
Yeah.
I really feel very strongly that that's an important thing in this world, for people to endeavor to do in whatever way works for them. And, whatever tradition they come from, or even if they're just out there on their own seeking, I think it's important to find connection that way. Another one that you've talked about that I really love, and it is connected to transcendence and all that, is the idea of flow. This is something that permeates this series. The idea of becoming so attuned to the universe through some realm of endeavor, some expertise, or whatever it is you do. And you and I have talked about this a lot. Like, you do rock climbing, I play tennis. It happens to me when I write, and just that absorption, that immersion, that dedication of oneself completely to something where time becomes irrelevant.
Right.
There's a kind of just beauty to that experience. And this is something that is explored again and again in the series, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. And it's that seeking of that flow, that kind of like wanting to figure out how to get there, and how to harness the ocean, harness that feeling of being able to lose yourself in a moment or a task. And we have one character who seems to live in the flow so easily, and one that has completely lost his connection to it and is trying to find it again in any way that he can. These two characters end up being the two core characters that we really focus on for a huge chunk of the story, and it's their connection to each other, it's their connection to the flow, and it's really just beautifully done. I think another thing that the story does really well is its connection to itself, like how things kind of weave in and out, and something that's set up way back here, we call back to it and we pull it forward, and that's a part of the fabric of the story. It feels so intentional while also feeling so natural.
Yeah, yeah. And there again, you've touched on another important theme, which is violence, and
Mm,
violence as a way of life. And I talked in the beginning about how this is a story set during a time of great transition, and the way
mhm,
of the sword, which was the ideal, the life of the samurai, and it was certainly idealized for quite a long period. And you have modern inventions creeping in here. You have guns becoming a thing, and that is obviously a huge threat to this older way of living, this older ideal, at least among the noble classes, or the people who are privileged enough to pursue that. Yeah, because there is also class is a thing that is touched on in here, and the relationship between the exploited and the exploiters and all of that. But violence is huge in here, and the
mhm,
impact that it has on an individual's self, and how it affects that individual's relationships with others, the repercussions of violence. And violence is everywhere in the series in a way, but it also is clear that Inoue is exploring violence in a way that is, and sometimes I think he's horrified by what he's
mm,
portraying. And one of the reasons why he didn't finish the series is, I think, just having to engage with the level of violence that he was having to portray there was becoming
mhm.
difficult. So he's looking at all of that too, isn't he?
Yes, and how it shapes you, how embracing that life really changes the way you perceive the world, and how embracing that life can haunt you and can follow you. And that's one way that it really also connects with Vinland Saga, is that concept of being haunted by your past. And just because you have turned over a new leaf doesn't mean that all the things you've done just fall away. You still have to confront that, and that still is going to affect you day to day. And that's a weight, but it's a weight that you can bear and you can move forward through and find a new path, despite, which I think is a really hopeful message. It shows the weight really effectively, while also giving you that kind of glimmer of hope of, but you can persevere, but you can walk that new path.
Yeah. Which brings in another theme, redemption, and
Yeah.
how, if redemption is possible for certain things, can you go back and fix things? Maybe not, and
Yeah, you can't undo what's been done,
right.
but can you still walk forward?
Yep. Exactly.
Mhm,
Exactly.
and then it explores that in Musashi, as well as in a couple of side characters. We have someone who's lived his life lying and stealing and, you know, putting on a persona that is false, and in doing that, the people who try to care for him are affected, and their lives are harmed in trying to care for him when he's living that very selfish, self-satisfying, self-gratifying life. They're affected negatively, and he has to bear that weight too. He has to bear the weight of how his family has suffered because of his selfishness, but still try to forge a path forward.
Yeah, beautiful. And there you go back to the ego, and
Mm,
that's the idea of living a life in pursuit of satisfying oneself versus living a life in communion with others. And
mhm.
so, yeah, it's so wonderful how these themes sort of interweave
They
throughout
do.
the series.
They really do. And while this is a very action-packed story, there's some awesome battles, really, really well-written action. It is a philosophical story. So
Hmm.
while Vinland Saga starts off being, I feel bad continuing to compare them. They are their own separate story.
They are, but
Well,
there are a lot of interesting parallels.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of parallels. They do a lot of the same things. Well, Vinland Saga starts off as an action-packed war story, revenge plot, and then it transforms into something else. Vagabond goes kind of back and forth between the two, because there's action all throughout, but there's also constant pauses in that to philosophize, because the characters have to work through what's going on inside of them. So it's awesome action, but that's not what the story is, and it'll be boring if you go in looking for action.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that awesome action, how about the art in
Yeah,
this? I mean, my goodness, it's interesting to think about how it changes.
it
You
does.
volume, the first, bind up I have here with me, and I know yours is a little beat up.
A little bit.
Just a little bit, because I read mine like this.
Right.
But the art changes, it evolves, and it's kind of cool actually. And I don't know how planned it was, or if just that's where his headspace was. But as the series progresses, I feel like the art is a reflection of where he's going in some ways, including that gorgeous ending that he gave us. So what are your thoughts on the art?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, some of it, I'm sure, is just the skill of an artist evolving as he practices his craft. But a lot of it is intentional as well. Like you'll see scenes, especially near the end, where Musashi really undergoes an internal transformation. And in that, we then see his face kind of shift as well. Like it really is reflected physically in them, which I love. Inoue has a brilliant talent at conveying emotion through the face, through his characters, which I love. And I really, really like the way he writes movement, the way he draws movement, be it with a sword, through people kind of shuffling in a battle, or if it's going to be like chains moving through the air. I'm obsessed with the chain and sickle stuff.
I know.
But he draws movement so well that you kind of just, it puts you right there in the scene of the action, and you feel just as moved around and disoriented as the characters do, while still being able to keep track of things for the most part really, really well.
Yeah. And there are some gorgeous scenes in there which reinforce the themes. There's some beautiful nature scenes where the theme of transcendence and oneness is being conveyed just through the visual, and it's beautiful. And the landscapes, just wow. I mean, the stars. He does a lot with bodies of water, rivers, oceans, and that sort of to go along with the flow theme.
Wow.
So just the art is I wouldn't even say it complements the story. In some ways, it is the story.
Yeah.
It's just such a wonderful medium in that sense. A lot is conveyed through the art here.
Yeah. A lot of the philosophy is connected to nature as well. What is it? Focus on the tree, or focus on the forest and miss the tree. Focus on the tree, miss the forest. What is it, Philip?
So I think
If you
it's
focus on a leaf,
on the
you'll
tree,
miss the tree.
miss the forest. Yeah.
Yeah, and focus on the tree, miss the forest.
Yeah.
I actually was just reading a novel last week that quoted that. And
Oh,
I was
cool.
like, okay, is this Inoue's quote that somebody else is quoting now? Or did Inoue pull this from some Buddhist philosophy?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, a lot of the philosophy that is presented to the characters is also tied into nature. So being able to have that discussion about focusing on one thing and then missing the greater picture is then perfectly depicted in this gorgeous landscape. Or you have Musashi scaling a mountain, and he gets to the top and he has this revelation on top of the mountain, and you physically see it while you experience it with him as well.
Yeah. That's good stuff. It's really good stuff. So, and the art, as I said, it kind of evolves. It gets a little more abstract, I think. And there are moments of real suffering and anguish that are reflected. There are moments of wrestling with the ego, where you have this abstract, symbolic stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. I love that Inoue kind of goes for it, and that he's willing to take risks, and I think they pay off in a really good way artistically in here.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that as the story becomes dependent more on philosophy, how he chooses to tell the story reflects that.
Yeah.
Because philosophy really is, it's not grounded, it's very abstract, it's very kind of wrestling with ideas, and his art stops being so grounded and starts reflecting that kind of wrestling.
Yeah, brilliant. So the last thing I want to talk about is the characters, and here's where we might get a little spoilery, I suppose. Take your chances. If you don't mind light spoilers, I suppose you can keep listening, because we are going to name names when we talk about the characters and talk in a general sense about their developments in the story. So if you consider that a spoiler, this is your warning. Otherwise, or of course, if you've read the series, you're welcome to stay. And if you're tolerant of that kind of light spoiler thing, then you are also welcome to stay. So that's your warning. Merphy, let's talk about characters. And I
Yes.
think I know who your favorite character in the series is.
Tell me.
I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe you're a Kojiro fan. Am I
Oh
right?
yeah, I'm a big Kojiro fan.
See, I've been paying attention here. So, but yeah, what are your wherever you want to go? What are your thoughts on the characters? You can talk about Kojiro first if you want. He's not the main character, but he's kind of a main character, isn't he?
He becomes a main character.
Yeah.
He's not introduced until like a third of the way through the story, and then he becomes one of the most essential pieces of the story.
Yeah.
But I love that because we're focused on Musashi and we're focused on his journey of being, the strongest under the sun, invincible under the sun, and his journey of defeating his opponents until he is the best, the strongest. And then someone comes into his life, Kojiro, who is his sheath, who is that perfect contrast to him that kind of awakens a new way of seeing the world and unlocks something in him that he had as a child that he lost. And their connection, their friendship, that scene with the snowman, their understanding of one another is something that I think amplified the series. And without Kojiro, had it only been Musashi's story, it would have been far less impactful. So introducing him into Musashi's life a little bit late, and at the time when he was open to seeing the world a little bit differently, and then Kojiro showed him kind of the harnessing of exactly what he was seeking, was such a great benefit to the story. But I love Kojiro. I love his kindness. I love his joy for life. I love his joy for just appreciating the earth and the people that come into his life and embracing it full tilt. But we have a lot of really great characters, a lot of side characters, as well as main characters that come in and out of the story that add so much to it. So that's kind of my real quick character thing, but I know that you love some side characters, especially.
Yes, yeah. Takuan the monk is my
Takuan the monk.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's not a.
You were consistent.
I'm very consistent. I mean, I loved him from the beginning, and then when I figured out, and with some help, I think from our viewers who left such lovely comments, that Takuan is in a way a stand-in for Inoue himself. That he's sort of doing a meta thing a little bit there with Takuan, and just the philosophy is I think gets inserted a lot through that character. He comes in key moments with both of the main characters, with Musashi, and he even appears. He has his little cameos with Kojiro, and he's an interesting voice that I found to be engaging in such lovely ways. And Kojiro it would be wrong in a way even to call him a foil for Musashi, because he's much more than just a foil, isn't he?
Yeah.
Full character in and of himself.
He is, yes.
But they are, even as they complement each other, as you said, there's that wonderful line that they're each other's sheath. Even as they complement each other, they're different too, aren't they? Because Kojiro we talked about flow and transcendence, and for him, and the decision to make him deaf is a part of that. But he seems to be so easily just in that flow and without having to struggle. And whereas Musashi, who has lived a life of violence, keeps finding it and then losing it and having to try to come back to it and struggling, really.
Yeah.
Most ordinary people, struggle. Right?
Yeah. Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. We see a lot of that with Musashi, where he's very stubborn and he's very lost in a lot of ways. He grew up with an abusive father. He grew up with this talent, this skill at violence, at fighting. He's very skilled with the sword. And because of the early influences he had in his life that that connection to the sword manifested as violence.
Yeah.
And Kojiro too had a very strong connection to the sword from a very young age,
Yeah.
strong talent for it. But because he was raised by a man who had lived by the sword and found it unfulfilling, his penchant for the sword ended up being a love for the craft.
Yeah.
And so these two men who are prodigies truly with the sword, because of their early influence, went in opposite directions with how they interacted with it.
Yeah.
And them coming together later in life means that they're able to kind of balance those ways of life and learn from each other, primarily Musashi learning from Kojiro. And I love that. I love seeing Musashi kind of go back and forth and having embraced this life of violence and how it's affected him and how it's transformed him, and then allowing people to speak into his life so that he can be more grounded and be more connected and be less selfish, was a really beautiful thing to watch, I think.
Oh yeah, so true. Yeah, you hit on another theme we didn't mention earlier, which is parent-child relationships.
Mm,
A lot of that explored
a
in
lot of that, even
particularly
with
father
Matahachi.
figures. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
particularly father figures. But yes, Matahachi has a mother, and that is something that gets explored a lot.
But he also has an uncle who's kind of like a stand-in as a father.
Yes, yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so that is something that gets explored a lot in here, and how certain ways of living, certain ideals and trauma get passed on from one
Mm,
generation to the next. So yeah, lovely
that
stuff.
is, yeah, that's a very strong theme, a very strong theme of not just parental figures, but also elders, wise old ones that come into your life, the life experience that they've had, whether positive or negative, and how they really impart that into their kids. And that's true for our main characters, for our side characters, but then like our side characters, people that just come into the story for a moment. I'm thinking of that bald character who fought Musashi early on.
That would be Inshun.
Inshun, thanks. Yeah, good one. Um, and how he, developed his own philosophies. I won't go deep into that, and developed his own life, and his father, who was waiting to pass on his secrets, waiting to pass on what he had for his son. So a lot of that, a lot of an older generation passing on what their life experiences to a younger generation, whether it be positive or negative. In Matahachi's case, there was a lot of negativity. In Musashi's case, there's a lot of negativity. But then there were also a lot of positive influences there too. We also had Ito, who was desperate to pass on his knowledge and his philosophies to the kids that he brought into, or to anybody that he brought into his life. Lots of that as well, and how that affects and shapes the younger generations.
So true. And also, I think you get some degree of understanding how becoming a parental figure can be so meaningful, particularly
Mm-hmm.
thinking about Jisai,
Yes.
who becomes the father of Kojiro.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually where I cried in Vagabond.
I remember that now.
That
Yeah.
was where I cried in Vagabond, was that
Yes.
relationship. And
Their connection was really beautiful.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in his case, becoming a father really changed his entire life. It really, he was in a low, dark place, and being able to give his life to another, being able to devote himself to another, being able to kind of shed that selfishness and share his life with another is what saved his life.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, there you see there. That purpose, finding one's purpose in connection. I don't think it gets more beautiful
Yeah.
than that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's what saved Musashi's life as well. All this time of going back and forth, it's the connection that finally grounded him and finally helped him to see it. Connection is really, it's such a huge aspect of the story.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yeah. I mean, you see him missing opportunities to connect with certain characters earlier, or running
Mm,
away from that connection because he fears what it might do to him, and in his how it might affect his quest to be the
right,
strongest, and
right.
then later discovering the importance of that kind of connection in a different setting
Yeah.
where
It
yeah,
actually strengthens instead of detracts.
yep, yep, yeah. So beautiful. Yeah. And both Vinland Saga and Vagabond have a farmland arc,
They
which is
do.
some of the most
And
beautiful moments too.
they
Yeah.
do. Yeah, they both have such strong farmland arcs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been so much fun. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we finish?
I think we covered it really well. I feel good about this.
I feel like we if somebody hasn't read this yet, I hope we've given a good sense of what the series is all about. And if somebody has read it, I hope they've enjoyed our ponderings, our thoughts, and just how impactful and beautiful this series is.
I'll say if you're gonna read it, if you haven't read it yet, try to find someone to read it with.
Yeah,
Because if I had read this on my own and I had just gone through it and not paused to unpack and talk about it, it would not have had nearly the same impact. So
same.
find someone to buddy read it with, find someone to chat about it with. That will make all the difference to really be able to pull from it what it has to offer.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, I really want to thank you, Merphy, for enriching this experience so much for me, for adding to my love of this beautiful story. This has been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, likewise. You added a lot of insight that I wouldn't have pulled had we not had these discussions. So super thrilled. And thanks to everybody who's commenting and helping to clarify and
Yes.
adding layers in that way as well.
Yeah, the commenters, the fans have been so wonderful and helpful. Thank you so much for all those and taking the time, and it makes it all much more meaningful. That's for
It
sure.
really does. Yeah. There's a lot of insight that was offered in the comment sections as well. So
Big time.
grateful for the larger scale buddy read. And we have another one coming up.
Yes. So I actually have my copy of the first bind up here. So dun, 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 we are going to be doing Monster, and you can expect our first discussion to become live on Murphy's channel in a week from when this is out. So yeah, we are going to start, everybody. So be ready for Monster in a week. And I'm
So we're
excited.
doing a bind up each time.
Yes.
So that's 2 volumes. One of the what's the edition called? Perfect edition bind ups.
This says Viz signature on the back.
Okay, sure. The Viz bind ups.
Viz Media.
Yeah, so we'll do one of those per week. We're going to shuffle back and forth on our channels as we have in the past. We might also have our friend Patrick on with us.
Yes.
So it'll be a good discussion. This is going to be a big shift for us, Philip.
Yeah.
We've been
Yeah.
doing war stories. Now we're going to take a break and do a mystery, I think.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see what manga does with mystery.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited about it too, because mystery is not my genre. But it might be fun to theorize with you and try to pick up on all the little
Yes.
hints and all that kind of
Who
stuff.
done
So
it?
a who done it. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. I think that it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, I think there's a kind of psychological thriller aspect to this too, maybe.
Is it? Okay.
I don't know, actually.
I know nothing about this. I know
Yeah.
that we've gotten several comments saying that it's some of the best
Yes.
villains.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that.
Yes, definitely. I'm up for some cool villains for sure.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, then, thank you so much, Murphy. And thank you, everybody. And as always, we welcome your comments and all of that. And hopefully we'll see you guys next week when we're talking about Monster. All right. Thank you so much, Murphy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Till next time, everybody.